I'm so thrilled, and I was a little thrown off by how many of you are here, but that even makes it even more thrilling. I, as Justin just said, am such a believer in these emerging technologies. I think it's a pretty big umbrella full of all sorts of technologies that are becoming viable and are converging in all sorts of fascinating and important ways that will impact the way we live and work. And I particularly love working with the New York City Media Lab because they are bringing all of those stakeholders together at one table, and there's a cross-pollination of not only ideas, but also in the doing and the making. And so I am beyond excited. Some of the prototypes, the projects, and the startups that you are going to see are just extraordinary. And the lines of inquiry that they're taking us, the lines of inquiry that they are taking and the sorts of projects, prototypes, products, and services that they are looking at certainly have the potential to fundamentally change very important aspects of the way that we live and work. And if you'll notice in your program, you can sort of follow along. There's descriptions of these companies on page 23 and 24, I believe. The first prototype up is You Are Here, an immersive journalism experience that uses augmented reality to tell NYC stories. We all love NYC stories, right? Melding past and present from a street-level view. Sandeep Junarkar and Jerry Hester are faculty members at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, and this project was supported by Verizon's Connected Futures Prototyping Program. Can we give them a warm welcome, please?
So hi, everybody. I'm Jerry Hester. I'm the news director at the J School.
And I'm Sandeep Junarkar, the head of the interactive program at the school.
So Sandeep is a former New York Times journalist. I'm a former reporter and later city editor at the Daily News. But at the J School, we work at the intersection of technology and storytelling.
So our backgrounds and inspiration all around us led us to create an immersive, smartphone-based experience that uses augmented reality to tell stories about New York City, melding past and present from a street-level view.
So New York brims with history, but the city's rich past too often gets buried under new layers. This means missed opportunities for visitors, for New Yorkers, and for businesses. Using archival photos and historic nuggets, You Are Here takes users through time, telling a tale through cultural and commercial shifts. Glimpses into the past, especially amid constant change, can show people where they fit into the larger, evolving narrative. You Are Here peels away the layers and helps users become a part of the ever-evolving story of New York.
So imagine aiming your smartphone at any street corner in the city and seeing a window to the past. You'll be able to swipe through multiple decades to view archival photos and get informative information with a tap.
So the first You Are Here experience will take users on a trip through the crossroads of the world, tracing a century plus of transformation at Times Square. The idea is to offer a sweeping odyssey via changing ads, theater marquees, and buildings. We found inspiration just feet from our West 40th Street office as we observed tourists looking up in wonder in Times Square and all it has to offer.
And we found the raw material literally at our feet, beneath our feet, in the sub-basement of the J School, where the New York Times hosts its incredibly rich photo archives. We got to know the Times archivist, Jeff Roth, who's a New York City treasure. Jeff helped us unearth some amazing images that go back to the turn of the last century. So now imagine you're a tourist who's just arrived in New York, one of 50 million who come to Times Square annually. You've traveled long and far, but you're just about to begin your journey. You pick up your smartphone, go to a popular tourism app, for example, here's a possibility, and you launch You Are Here, a portal back in time. Here's a demo of the of what it might look like. So here you are in present-day Times Square. You can swipe through the decades, and as you look around now, you'll see little hotspots pop up where we might have archival footage. And you click on that, and you see something about that particular era, some information that gives you a better understanding. You can scroll back all the way to the turn of the last century. That's where the ball drops from now. In the back, that's where they built that out.
So tourists are one natural market for this, but we can tailor You Are Here experiences to the education market as well as to New Yorkers by offering deeper dives into neighborhoods.
So this project represented a deep dive for us and a steep learning curve in many ways, coming from our storytelling backgrounds. But we quickly got excited about AR's potential as a journalistic tool. The means to building AR applications is moving very quickly, and with now the release of Apple's AR Kit for iOS and Google's AR Core for Android, it's likely to only get easier. In fact, we're building courses around AR that take data and geolocated stories and build around that.
So this has been a real lesson for us. We've learned quite a bit. And a great part of that learning came through the great support system set up by the Media Lab and Verizon. The regular feedback on everything from the scope of the project to tech recommendations, all this proved extremely valuable. And the connections we've made are already paying dividends, including this great opportunity to be with all of you here today.
Okay, but we're still under construction. There's still a lot to do. Where's our journey going to take us going forward? We do have some ideas. We've spoken to the city's media and entertainment office about piggybacking off of existing apps, tourism apps. We're seeking partnerships and advertising opportunities, theaters, restaurants, and others.
Yeah, and we think there are brand story opportunities here as well. I mean, just imagine helping Coca-Cola tell its history through 85 years of Times Square billboards. We could do a desktop version aimed at people planning trips to New York. We're looking at employing location-specific markers to draw local advertisers. And we think there are, going to our journalism background, there's opportunities here to help legacy news organizations dust off the treasures that they have, whether it's photos, video, even audio, and dust it off and make it shine for a new time.
And we're definitely open to customizing the storytelling based on a company's need. And why just stay in New York? We could move beyond New York as well and tell stories from elsewhere. And as I said earlier, we were inspired to create a course around AR using data, charts, graphics, etc. And very specifically, I think there's an opportunity to work with New York City schools and their curriculum on New York City. So actually tapping the city to tell the kids more about their place where they live.
In short, we see You Are Here as an opportunity to expand the digital future by mining the past.
And we'd like to thank our Dean, Sarah Bartlett, and Andy Mendelson for their support. We'd also like to thank Verizon, NYC Media Lab, and also, very importantly, the collaborative process we had with our fellow grant recipients for helping You Are Here. They made us feel like we were at the right place at the right time, so thank you.
Thanks very much.
We're going to move right along. Bloomberg AR for Enterprise is up next. Two creative technologists from NYU's Interactive Telecommunications program, yay, NYU. Kate Temrowski and Cristina Cannella recently graduated from ITP. They're geniuses, I've worked with them. And their spring semester, they were selected to participate in a rapid prototyping project, a fellowship with Bloomberg. The two explored data analysis and team collaboration in AR using, of all things, Excel pivot tables. Take it away, ladies.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Is this working? I think so. Okay. Hey, everyone. I'm Katie, and this is Cristina, so thank you guys for being here today.
We're going to talk about our project at Bloomberg. The question they posed to us was, where does AR fit in the workplace? So they asked us to think about augmented reality for enterprise and how it could change data analytics and collaboration in the workspace. They were doing this with Lampix. Lampix is a smart lamp that you could see illustrated on the desk there, anything within the projection becomes a smart object, so you could turn any surface into a smart surface. In our case, this was a desk, and we imagined what this could do on every desk at Bloomberg.
Yeah, and it was actually really interesting because the data science team at Bloomberg were the ones who put out this sort of like call to action, which I think is really an important note when you're thinking about AR in the workforce. It's not just being used by the actual VR and AR teams, right? It's being used by the actual data scientists, seeing it as a medium for new ways to unlock hidden like trends in data.
Yeah. So, yep, I'm Cristina, and this is Katie. We're both from ITP, as we're graduates now. I'm a UX designer, and Katie's a software engineer, design technologist. We were excited about this project because we were excited to do kind of problem solving and have a real world application for AR, especially in data analytics and collaboration, and get to practice some user-centered design.
Yeah, applied to future interfaces, which is always really exciting. So we ended up focusing on pivot tables as our entryway, and I know a lot of people are probably like, why pivot tables? It's sort of a, you know, I apologize to any pivot table enthusiasts, but probably a dinosaur when we're looking at you know, ways to analyze data. So we saw it as a really great entryway for people because it's very it's ubiquitously used across enterprises, from law firms to, you know, businesses, small businesses. It's a way that has very low barrier to entry. The no coding, as well as the gestures within pivot tables, lend themselves well to AR gestures. So it seemed like a really natural fit for a rapid prototyping challenge because we can sort of dive in quick and sort of build off of those already existing gestures.
Yeah. I hit the red button? Okay. So our proposal, we only had 6 weeks, so we wanted to integrate with initiatives already happening at Bloomberg, so this would feel real and compelling to them. There was already an initiative going on to extract and convert data from PDFs into readable data. We then worked with a tool on GitHub to start to pivot this data, and this integrated well with Lampix's technology. And then finally, we used Lampix to convert this data and connect it to physical objects that you can drag and drop to your X and Y axis for a pivot table.
So yeah, so after we had established what we were going to do to answer this challenge, we started prototyping. And in terms of AR and VR, the one thing that AR has a leg up on VR is it facilitates collaboration. You can easily prototype for it with pen and paper. So as you see, we started there. We wanted to get we wanted to feel what it might feel like to move these sort of fields around and unlock new trends in the data. We wanted to see what the scale should be, as well as how the gestures feel. And then we took it to the digital version. We ended up starting with a really basic sort of gray and white color scheme. We tested out different sizes, different typefaces. As you see, a few iterations in, we ended up with the more stylized version just to see what felt right in that space, and we threw it on Lampix and tested and tested and tested.
And our slider design. So this was a really important part of our project. Being back in the real world, we wanted to take advantage of the satisfaction that comes from tangible interactions. So we put a lot of thought into our sliders. We wanted to let people know intuitively that this was something you can push and move around on your desk. So we put 3 little grooves on each one and tested that with different people to see if they got the idea. We also thought about scale under the projection and also what would feel good in your hand, and then compatibility with Lampix, so something that would be a good surface to show text projected on. And then this is us on demo day, and we thought we would just talk about a couple lessons learned from this experience. The first, which I think we both feel strongly about, is that we only had 6 weeks, and it was really easy to try and go right into the technology, but we're glad we didn't, and we stopped, and we did some pen and paper exercises to flesh out this idea because it really changed a lot. Early on, we weren't even using sliders. We were going to use a finger pointing and motion tracking, so our idea really changed from these exercises.
Yeah, I would say another thing that was really interesting was to be able to see how this proposed collaboration that we thought might happen when you go from the sort of like one-dimensional, one person with one mouse looking at a pivot table and understanding how this data works, and then bringing it into the collaborative sphere, allowing other people to sort of look at it and like analyze different like data. And that really like, we were so happy to see that like become fulfilled and see the sort of like hypothesis that we had at the very beginning came true. And we saw like on demo day just to see how people were talking about this sort of like very dry data set that we had, and it came to life. So I think that was really exciting. And proof that AR, the biggest hurdle that I think a lot of us in this room have probably talked about is the lack of like bringing people together around AR. And so I think it's like really important to be doing a lot of work around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be back.
Can we find Cristina? Okay, we're going to keep it moving, and we're going to go to R Aligned. This is a multiplayer VR experience, something many of us in this space are looking to and working hard at, trying to understand the dynamics that would allow some material experience with multi-use. This is created by Danny Dang, who is a recent graduate from Parsons BFA Design and Technology program here at the New School. Yay! Danny participated in this summer's VR fellowship with Viacom Next, which is doing some extraordinary experimenting, a team that is focused on the future of music and entertainment and emerging technology. Our Aligned is an asynchronous, collaborative VR physical game where players communicate and work together to perform a song. So welcome, Danny.
Hi guys, I'm Danny, and I'm going to talk about a project I made called R Aligned. So just before I get into that, I'm just going to tell you a little more about myself. She already went over the fact that I'm a Parsons graduate, BFA Design. When I was here, I actually studied game design, and that was the only thing I focused in my 4 years here. In my senior year, however, I decided to take the leap and get into VR. And this was all made possible by New York City Media Lab because, of course, the headsets and the equipment is so expensive. I got the grants from the Verizon program and the Viacom program to create the first and second VR experiences I ever made. The first one, which is Zur, is a VR game that I made that taught kids how to spot fake news online. And the second one I made, R Aligned, which is the one I'm going to talk about today, is a multiplayer game. So raise your hand in the audience if you've tried a single-player VR game, just standard vanilla VR. Cool, so keep your hands up if you've tried a multiplayer VR game. So I noticed a lot of hands went down. For me, when I first got into VR, I felt it was very exciting and fun, but a lot of the things that I had qualms about was that it was kind of isolating, and it was a lot of, it was hard to share and hard to access for a lot of people. It was a lot of fun for one, and it was kind of escapist. So the idea behind my project was that I wanted to make something that was multiplayer. So that's why I made R Aligned. R Aligned is an asymmetric VR party game where players communicate and work together to perform a song. And I'm going to show you guys a video just to give you a better idea of what I'm saying.
To the right? Or my right? Yeah, there you go. You're good.
Okay, 2 more balls. I've got a green and I've got a yellow.
So if you guys notice in the video, there's about 5 people playing the game at the same time. The person inside the headset is the one that has all the visuals around them. And in my game, I'm calling them a sky watcher. So basically, they have locations and colored orbs where they can dictate to the people outside playing the game. And the people on the outside are called star runners. There's 2 to 4 of them, depending on how many people are playing, and each of them are holding a colored star, which I've made using the HTC Vive trackers, which just came out this year. Their goal as a team is to find the locations, realign the star system, and when they all work together and realign the stars, the players are rewarded with music. Talking about the hardware that was used in this project, so the HTC Vive trackers just came out this year. They're basically controllers, but without the input and the vibration and all the motors, so they can just track location. And they can be paired with more than 2. So normally with an HTC Vive, you have a controller in each of your hands. With this, you can pair up to 4 or more, which is why I decided to use it for my multiplayer game. Talking about some of the other design choices that I made when I built this game, because VR already is kind of a steep hill to get people excited about, I wanted to keep the gameplay and the visuals and everything about the game very accessible. So I decided to do that by making the core mechanic is just talking to each other, moving around, and being able to communicate. There isn't much other gaming knowledge that you really need to know to play the game. And with the tools, because the trackers are relatively new and not a lot of people have held them in their hands, I decided to make them a little more friendly to hold as well. So I encased them in these orbs and tried to make them look a little toy-like. And throughout the whole design process, I decided to keep communication and collaboration the center of the entire experience because I wanted to create that true multiplayer VR experience. This is just a screenshot from the game showing you guys the visuals. I tried to keep it very simple and space-themed. Not a lot is going on in the game that people have to keep track of besides these colored orbs. And this is from the demo that we had at Viacom actually last month. And one of the writers from Engadget, I think, put it very well in a sentence, what I'm trying to accomplish with this. He says he's hoping to recapture the magic of a party mainstay like Twister by merging together VR with a game anyone can hop into on a whim. So moving on, I guess for me, the future I see of this game is that I'd see it in demos like this one. I'd see it maybe published to the game app store of Steam or used as like a team building exercise for corporates or for kids. Thanks so much. If you guys have other questions, feel free to reach out to me. And if you guys have time for some multiplayer VR, come check it out at Arnold Hall on the 2nd floor. Thank you.
Danny makes an excellent point that many people in this room know very well, which is the tools for making, creating, and investigating the applications of this technology are iterating so fast. I mean, he mentioned the trackers, and there's certainly, we're going to see in the next grouping of presentations, real optimization for some of those tools. So I think that's important to watch out for. Next up, we have Calling Thunder. It focuses on audio design and immersive storytelling. We're going to hear from David Alahim, who recently graduated from the School of Visual Arts, MFA Interaction Design program. He produced in the A&E Network's Digital Media Storytelling Fellowship. Calling Thunder lets you explore the unsung history of New York through spatial audio, very interesting technology there, and mobile VR. So welcome.
Can you hear it? The thunder above. It has roamed the sky since the beginning. It remembers Manhattan, the island of many hills. Today, nearly 2 million call it home. The Big Apple, the concrete jungle, Gotham, the island at the center of the world. But it was not always so. Calling Thunder explores the natural history of New York through mobile video, mobile VR, 360 video, and spatial audio. It's the culmination of a year spent exploring some of the relationships between data, technology, and the natural world. I don't mean texting in the wild, but technology like ambisonic microphones and 360 cameras like the one I'm triggering here in this photo. And after working with a number of media organizations and nonprofits to tell stories in 360 about the environment, I was left with some questions about impact. Not just how might immersive media enable more meaningful stories about natural history, but how might this technology enable more memorable stories about natural history? Inspiration struck when I discovered Dr. Sanderson's book, Mannahatta, which tells the story of a New York City I've never known. One of rich wildlife, stunning vistas, and the population of the Lenape who had lived here for many of years. But most interesting to me was the website Eric put together with the Wildlife Conservation Society, which allows users to go block by block and explore what species might have been here, what plants may have grown. And immediately I was interested in how could we transform this data into an immersive experience. But what does that mean? What kind of experience? What tools might be best suited to bring this data to life and tell this story? While visuals have dominated many of the recent developments in 360 video and VR, I realized that audio would be best suited for this story, for its ability to convey a sense of place, to provoke the imagination, without being overly prescriptive. Fortunately, Dr. Sanderson was also interested in exploring how new media could bring this to life, and with the support of the A&E Networks, the Media Lab, and my friend Bill McQuay at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, we began constructing 360 soundscapes to bring users on a journey from Lower Manhattan at Collect Pine Park all the way up to Inwood Hill, using the data on the website to populate these rich sonic environments. The result compared how New York looks and sounds today to how it may have sounded in 1609. And I'd like to share a few insights we learned along the way. Number one, it's kind of okay to be afraid of the dark. The initial intention was to use 360 video to convey 2017 soundscapes and video and show how it looked, and then turn the lights off for 1609, provoking people to really focus on the sonic space. Unfortunately, that meant people were disoriented, and oftentimes they thought the device or story was broken. So the solution was to think about how illustration could play a role in making animated graphics, lightweight for mobile, function as what Bill called a coloring book for sound, and support the soundscapes without over-prescribing what they may have looked like, given that we don't know all of that detail. Second, when you're constructing a story, an immersive story like this from the ground up, you have the opportunity to rethink your user interface. And I believe that it's important to offer a new kind of interface that ties directly to the narrative. In this case, that means the primary mode of navigation through the story is looking up into the sky, summoning a thunderclap, and transitioning to the next story. This also solves the problem of transitioning the underground area out without disorienting users. And also finding ways to convey the interactions on the virtual space to ones that are also reflected on mobile devices and other means, desktop as well. And finally, we have an opportunity to A/B test the content itself. I was struck to find that some pieces of information, some parts of the story resonated with users more than others. Some facts were more memorable. For example, Canal Street was built where the canals used to be to drain the water from the Collect Pond Park in Lower Manhattan. So working with our fabulous narrator, we actually reworked the story to have the best, most memorable experience we could deliver. I think the other thing that was interesting in the kind of story development part of this was realizing that while you can create a really exciting and interesting experience with audio-visual stimulation that kind of great. It's also, you do need a hook, you need a story that draws the users through the journey. It's not just enough to, provide a stunning soundscape. But the media person in me, and for those of you who have worked on the media side of distribution, you realize that 360 content has the potential of limiting your audience size. And so from the beginning, I was interested in creating a distribution model that would reach people on the devices they're already using and on the platforms they're familiar with. This meant creating a desktop, hosting on a website with a desktop and mobile separate experience, a downloadable app as well. Providing segmented content experiences where you could go into each scene individually if you didn't want to hear the entire story. Producing a podcast version for those interested in listening only. And also segmenting things in playlists on platforms like YouTube and Vimeo, which support 360 content. And this made it really easy for organizations and media groups to not only cover the work we were doing, but also embed it directly in their platform. NPR, for example, could host our audio content, while the New York Times could play our 360 videos within their platform. But the most exciting feedback we got was actually from fourth grade teachers who were using this as a tool to teach the history of Manhattan in their classrooms. I didn't know this, but it's a part of the core curriculum, the history of Manhattan for fourth graders. And we also heard from the Lenape Center, who were excited to get involved with us in bringing some of the human sounds of 1609 to life. Moving forward, we're excited and hope to continue working with the Wildlife Conservation Society as they develop more robust visual models for what New York would have looked like, and get this into the hands of more students, teachers, and interested New York history environmental enthusiasts. I think in closing, meaningful and memorable stories are only really meaningful if they change one's perspective on the future. And while 360 Media has done a great job in bringing us back in time, we have to think about what it can do moving forward. With that, we've started another project called Catalog Earth, which uses 360 video as an archival tool to document existing landscapes for those interested in using it in the future ahead, so we have something to look back on. And I just want to say thank you to the Media Lab for this event, for their support in this project, and everybody else who helped bring this project to life. Thank you.
Whenever someone says to me, well, I'm really a skeptic about VR and storytelling, my immediate thought is always, I'm not even sure what you're saying, mostly because we're not sure exactly what VR and storytelling means yet. There's so much experimenting that needs to be done. It's almost as if, with the advent of the camera, someone said we're going to take a book manuscript and we're going to transform that immediately into a movie. I think we'd all agree that would be a ridiculous idea. The nature, the tools, the process, and the actual outcome are radically different in a movie than it is in a book. And it's the same with virtual reality or any of these realities. That would be my argument. And I think David laid out a really compelling case for this notion of experimenting, because we're moving towards a storytelling that we've never had before and perhaps had never even imagined. I'll get off my soapbox now. And we're going to move on to StreetsSmarts VR. This is a startup, and it's a team from Columbia and NYU. The concept went through the NYC Media Lab's accelerator program this past spring. The team here today is led by George Lamb, and the mission of StreetsSmarts VR is to bring realistic virtual reality, simulation, training, and workforce analytics to state and local police departments. So they're certainly taking on a very present and relevant challenge around the questions of police and community. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me here this morning and for giving me some of your time. I'm George Lamb. I'm the CEO and founder of StreetsSmarts VR, and we're a virtual reality training company focused specifically on public safety markets and police training. So imagine for a second you're a 21-year-old police officer at the NYPD. It's around this time of the day and you're walking across 42nd Street in New York. And you look over towards 42nd and 7th Avenue, towards Times Square, and you see several of your colleagues with their weapons out, shouting commands at an individual. You run down the street to see what's going on, and you run ahead of them, and you find yourself in this situation. You're standing in the middle of Times Square, you have an individual with a knife in their hand, charging directly towards you. These are the types of incredibly difficult decisions we ask the men and women in law enforcement to make every single day. And at StreetsSmarts VR, we think we have a solution to help them be more prepared for that very difficult trial. So at StreetsSmarts VR, we provide distributed, immersive virtual reality training with the goal of improving officer judgment and reducing avoidable police-citizen violence. So why did we start this company? Anybody with 2 eyeballs and an internet connection knows there's been a series of tragedies in American communities over the last 24 months. In 2016, 963 Americans were killed in police shootings. 64 American police officers were also killed in the line of duty. When our founding team started to look through some of this data, we came across this paragraph from a Department of Justice report on the issues of police violence. And that opening line is kind of the founding hypothesis for our company. This suggests a failure of training. Our company, half the founding team are military veterans. I myself am a Marine Corps officer and an Afghanistan veteran. And during my experience in the Marine Corps, I was exposed to fantastic world-class training that prepared me for very difficult real-world situations in combat in Afghanistan. Currently, in the American policing, we feel that officers aren't receiving the kind of training that they need. And we think if we can revolutionize the way American police officers are trained, we can prevent some of these tragedies from occurring in our communities. So during our customer research effort, we've done 137 customer interviews. We've talked to officers from Manhattan, New York to Manhattan, Kansas, Washington State to Washington, D.C. And these are kind of the 3 big problems that we've hit on. First on, current police training is not immersive, it's unrealistic, and the training is terribly infrequent. So how are we at StreetsSmarts VR going to try to solve these 3 problems? We're going to develop virtual reality content. We're currently developing in Unity for the Vive. All of our content is going to be real world. We're basing every one of the scenarios that we make on a real life police situation, either a body camera footage, media reports, internal police reports. And the goal is to always have that closest possible facsimile to reality when we're doing our training contents. Finally, we're going to distribute headsets right into police precincts. And we think this will drastically increase training frequency. So the NYPD just spent $750 million on a new training facility in Queens. That's fantastic if you're an officer in Queens, but if you're in the North Bronx or you're in Staten Island, that's a 3-hour round trip, meaning you can only get there once, maybe twice per year. We're going to distribute our training systems right into precincts. We think we can 10, 12, 15x the amount of training that American police officers receive with this system. So in terms of the market, our market sizing exercise tells us about a $6 billion market globally, at least $1 billion in the US. That's 920,000 police officers in the United States, split up into 12,000 separate policing agencies. The reason why we're talking about market size is it shows us that we can establish a sustainable business model that will truly address this problem at a national scale. In terms of the competitive landscape, our competitors are bifurcated into digital direct competitors and physical real-world competitors. So in terms of digital direct training, our 2 most direct competitors are Milo Range and Virtra. They provide 2D flat screen training systems. So imagine, a screen just like this in a room in a police precinct. We were going through a police scenario. It's not immersive, and some of the scenarios are really unrealistic. And our customer feedback from our 137 interviews shows that we have a true competitive differentiation from these individuals. In terms of indirect physical, our biggest competitor is the status quo. Most state licensing agencies require a police officer to qualify on their weapon systems once or twice per year. For many American police officers, that's the only training they receive per year is their annual weapons qualification. So we're going into an issue that is very difficult and very sensitive. And the opportunity for design failure is present, where we actually exacerbate the problem. So we've gone through a very deliberate design process over the last 6 months. And our design philosophy is built around VR scenarios that replicate the ambiguous high-stress situations that police officers actually solve, with the goal of improving attitudes and behaviors and thereby improving outcomes is our goal. So we shot motion capture last week. This is an example of one of the scenarios that we would have right now. This is a domestic violence encounter where it's a pair of police officers going into an American home where there's been a domestic violence altercation. and we have some more kind of real world footage right here. The way that we know that our training is being effective, we had a couple officers down at our office yesterday from a department in Connecticut that we're piloting with later in the fall. When we showed them the live action video of this scenario, the officer turned to our founding team and he said, "This is exactly what happened to me 2 weeks ago." That lets us know that we're really recreating those tough, ambiguous, high-stress situations for police officers. So the reason why we're here is we all know that an average day for an American police officer can go from this to this in an instant. And the current status quo, we think, is intolerable. 64 American police officers were shot and killed in line of duty last year. 48 unarmed American citizens were also killed. That's 112 wrong decisions and 112 grieving families. We're a for-profit enterprise, but we have a big social mission, and that is the problem that we're here to solve. So I'm George Lamb, we're StreetsSmarts VR, and thank you very much for your time.